So what's perking up the global coffee market? Well, to find out, let's welcome Dan Cox. He's the president and owner of Coffee Enterprises. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Rachelle.
So as we've seen, the taste for fancy coffee drinks and experiences has really grown. But as coffee culture changes, how are farmers adapting?
Farmers are still getting the short end of the stick. And there's a couple of primary reasons. Number one, it's still a buyer's market. And the small farmer is somebody who has 2 hectares or less. And they have to, and mostly they're selling what's known as cherry, which means the seeds are still in the bean. Seeds are still in the cherry, the fruit, and they have hours to sell it. They don't have days, they have hours to sell it. And buyers know this, and they know what's going on, and of course they're always trying to get the lowest price. And so if you have a product that is truly raw, has not been finished, you're not sure about the quality of the product, and there's not a lot of pride of ownership because farmers don't even taste their own coffee, the buyers have a huge advantage.
So with that being said, we know that there's been this momentum to have a minimum set price for coffee. How is that momentum gathering, and why are we seeing any comparisons with other commodities like oil?
No, I don't think that in the long run it makes a lot of sense. It sounds on the surface that having a minimum quality would equate to a minimum price, but that's really not the case. The bulk of the coffee sold in the world is still sold on the Intercontinental Exchange. 85% of all coffee is still sold at that market via the U.S. dollar as a currency. So it's nice to talk about minimum standards, and I'm a huge advocate for that. But the big volume buyers are still looking primarily for price.
So are there any lessons that the coffee industry can take from other industries to really sort of even the playing field for farmers?
Yes. I think the number one thing they can do is farmers need to understand a lot about their product. And unfortunately, they really don't. They need to know how to grow it, how to harvest it, how to prune it, and then how to process it. Now, processing plants cost a lot of money. There's usually a wet mill or a dry mill if you have water nearby. Those are very expensive. So since the farmers can't create those, it's in their best interest to form cooperatives and sell their product together in a bigger quantity. And also, if they happen to be lucky enough to have a special terroir, a taste of place, so to speak, they can then try to brand it specifically and break away from some of the commodity prices, because they can say this coffee was grown here and it tastes like this, and no place else in the world can you get that taste.
So if farmers did go down that road of having these cooperatives, what would it mean for some of these large and some of these craft producers as well as consumers?
It means helping them, first of all, because the buyer at the end of the day has to buy something. And it's in their best interest to buy a product that needs the least amount of handling after the sale. So if they're buying low quality coffee that a lot of it has to be processed out and they have a really low yield, that's not in their best interest. So the first thing I think buyers need to do is they need to form more of a relationship with the farmer and say, listen, it's in your best interest as well as mine to grow a product that needs as little handling as possible. I'm here to help you. So the good buyers know that, and they want to work out years in advance, because candidly it takes about 4 years a minimum when you plant a seed to have a harvest. So farmers that are getting into the business now aren't going to see really a harvest until 2022, 23. That's a long ways to wait.
Now, you mentioned the careers of farmers. We know that agriculture actually provides more jobs than any other industry in the world, but fewer people are becoming farmers. How do you encourage this next generation of farmers, and what does the future of farming look like?
We hear a lot in the business about the cost of production or the cost of goods, and I think that's kind of a fundamentally backwards way of looking at it. What we should be talking about is a quality of life and the cost of living, not just the cost of the product. So the retention of youth on the farms is a huge problem. The average age of a coffee producer, and that's what we call a grower, is in the high 50s and low 60s. That is a really old age to do a lot of really difficult work. So if you want people to stay on the farm, you got to make the farm a good place to stay. And that means a lot of the modern conveniences, so not just Wi-Fi, but good water, good sanitation, good access to roads, good access to education. You got to increase their quality of life, not just the cost of the product.
All right, thank you so much for your insights. Dan Cox there, President and owner of Coffee Enterprises.